Hey everyone, welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's July 13th, 2022. My name's Eric Osterman and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, which just means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your teams and showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered, so feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a video recording of today's session to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and want to support it, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out a great deal. Just go to youtube.com/Cloud Posse. So with that said, let's jump into the few announcements that I had. Nothing too exciting. One was, if you're using GuardDuty today, they did announce, Amazon just announced that they are adding some more intelligence to it with ML for detecting certain types of malicious access to S3 buckets. So that just is catching up with, I think, a lot of the competition and what they do. The other thing that came across my inbox was this here, automating Terraform documentation with visualizations. This is highly relevant because we were just talking last week, I believe, and possibly even the week before, on how to improve documentation with Terraform. I think what we kind of agreed at, that there's a consensus. It is hard to generate meaningful documentation. It's seldom ever better than the documentation you would put your blood, sweat, and tears into writing. Well, I guess Pluralith is trying to change that. It is another tool for reading the Terraform graph and generating some pretty diagrams from that. So if you see here, I think they had a screenshot. I believe it is just a CLI from GitHub. It looks like there is a pricing SaaS model based on it. So maybe it's not entirely free then. Where were those screenshots I saw though? Yeah, so this was an example of the diagram that would be generated by the Pluralith tool. Seems a little bit better than some of those automated diagrams. In this case, it's really just showing containers of where things are deployed, like within a VPC, within a availability zone, and showing the resources therein. So I'm curious if this service, how this service operates. Anything that is operating on the Terraform graph, or at least the Terraform plan file, would be a security concern. But if it can do all of that local processing and just send some non-sensitive data rather to the Pluralith service, then I think that's maybe acceptable if you trust it. Has anyone seen Pluralith already and kicked the tires on it? I think it was just featured on Reddit in the past week or so and was trending. As with all of these, I'm always curious kind of, how it translates to the reality. When you have a test project with a very simple architecture, I think you can come up with a pretty successful diagram like this. In the real world, the number of resources and things that you have deployed might make something like this a lot less pretty. All right. The next announcement was just something, it's actually not a recent announcement, it was back in June. But if you recall, HashiCorp has come out with Boundary, that is their zero trust solution. It's entirely open source, but in the HashiCorp cloud model, right, they're releasing these open source tools and then creating a hosted component if you want to avoid having to do that yourself. So this is another example of them doing that now with Boundary. Recently, they announced the same thing with Waypoint. So Waypoint is their other kind of deployment framework that they've been building out, and they have a managed solution for that too. Be curious to hear from anyone who has tried either of these new kind of pilots out. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword with one of these things. You know, they solve an interesting problem. HashiCorp builds nice tools, but really, I don't want to beta VPN to guard my corporate network. I don't want to beta a deployment solution to release my software. I want that, stable, robust thing. So as long as they keep those words like public beta, it really dissuades me from trying them out at this time. All right, any other, well, let's see here. Here's another announcement somebody added. AWS CloudFormation StackSets announces support for account level targeting in organizational units. Interesting. So does this mean you can have a CloudFormation that stuffs stacks into multiple accounts as a part of a single deploy?
That's what you could do already with StackSets,
Okay.
or a subset of StackSet features. I
Okay.
don't know, I don't remember names. This allows you to target it specifically at the level of organizational units. So, hey, for any account in the developer organizational unit, also deploy this StackSet that automatically sets up
Okay.
a teleport or
Like for
whatever.
guardrails or things like that you want to have for all accounts within an OU.
Yeah, I use it a lot for IAM role creation, for CICD tooling and things like that. I
Okay.
really like CloudFormation for that.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice for that. Okay. Any questions on that or other interesting announcements? The last one was just Cloud WAN. It was announced at reInvent. It's been, I guess, in a closed beta or private beta. Now it is a GA. So this Cloud WAN offering, it makes it easier for organizations to manage a large global network, having it all peer in with Amazon and then having managing that routing there. But I don't have that link handy. Yeah, Cloud WAN. All right. I guess we'll move into Q&A. We didn't have any questions teed up as of when we kicked off the call. So
I found a few. Eric, did you also want to shout out the candidate for V2 of our Terraform security module? Jeremy put that out there last Thursday.
Oh, yeah, that's worthy of it. Thanks for bringing that up. I did forget about that. So security groups, who knew they were so complicated? I think almost a year ago, excuse me. A year ago, we released the first first attempt at implementing security groups with Terraform. The design consideration for Cloud Posse in creating a new module is we want to be able to define the interface for consistently deploying some bit of infrastructure or resources. So we came up with what we thought was a pretty intuitive interface for that. But in practice, we ran into a lot of issues using it because it brought back the dreaded count of cannot be computed sort of things, or the inability to dynamically create security groups and security group rules as part of the plan. So we went through a number of iterations with this. Unfortunately, we had also gone through rolling out our security group module to a lot of our Terraform modules, including EKS and Redis and so forth. And that's when we discovered these warts kind of the implementation. So we actually, in some extreme cases, we actually just ripped it out and rolled back to the version preceding that. In other cases, we were able to implement some workarounds. But Jeremy on our team has been working at length over the past years, coming up with redesigning the security group module and written up an exceptionally long piece on kind of all the considerations when trying to do security groups in AWS the right way and with Terraform. And some interesting considerations, for example, you can never have duplicate rules, and yet you don't want to have downtime. So that often means that you can't use create before destroy. Alternatively, what you can do is you can actually just create a net new security group. But then if you're referencing that security group, but from other places in other Terraform states, then those break. So what we ended up deciding to do was implement a feature flag called preserve security group ID. And depending on how you toggle that, you can choose between the various trade-offs of whether or not a new group is created or not, or whether security group rules are destroyed before they are created to prevent any issues there. And all of that is now supported by the module, and we are in the process of pushing this out through all of our module ecosystem, so we have a consistent way of defining ACLs for everything that you depend on. Has anybody dealt with these issues with security groups in AWS and issues with creating before destroying? Any other questions related to it?
Yeah, they have. We ended up having to take it off. I haven't.
We can barely hear you there. I'm sorry, I'm not sure even who's talking. I can't see on my screen here, but we can't hear you. Is that Marcos? We cannot hear you.
Sorry, is that any better?
A lot of background noise. Maybe it sounds like maybe you're in a cafe or something.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, well, feel free to post some comments in the chat. We can repeat them out here. All right. Someone else is mentioning, have you ever considered using Firewall Manager for deploying security groups? That's a good question. We do have support for Firewall Manager as a Terraform module like Cloud Posse. I think it solves a similar but different problem. What we prefer to do is that our modules are self-contained and have all their security groups provisioned alongside of the module itself, and then we use those to plug and play with other services that need them. I think the Firewall Manager plays better into a corporate environment where you have a finite set of these security groups that you want to centrally manage across the organization to standardize things. But I'm curious if any other takes on it. All right. And talking points. So what are some of the options for exposing internal Aurora Serverless Postgres database to an external application that requires the data to be up to date? That's a tricky one. We've previously done this in one way, but it really is not ideal. So what you are able to do is use NLBs, but NLBs don't support security groups. So your option is literally open it up to the world and put an NLB in front of it. Or I guess what you can always do is the old tried and true Bastion SSH port forwarding technique. And now doesn't AWS now have a native managed service for port forwarding? through SSM or something?
You can definitely do port forwarding through SSM.
Yeah, this is the announcement I was thinking about. But I don't know. I haven't even looked or kicked the tires of this. Basically, this is so you can have a managed jump host. And I mean, I wouldn't do this for like a massively, the popular application in the critical path of whatever you're doing. But if you're just doing some basic ETL or you need to fetch some data out of your RDS, this might be sufficient. What we have seen other customers do and what we've helped some of our customers do is we'll deploy a Bastion host and then set up port forwarding on there. We've had to do that for integrations with like Stitch Data and I forget the other one. There's another service similar to Stitch Data for ETL, managed ETL pipelines.
Yeah. The other thing I know, this is more of a network connectivity question, I think, but I've also seen Cognito used in this effect where you basically, your application can get temporary like IAM credentials to actually access the database. And obviously you need to have physical network access to that port, but at least you can secure it on a like per user basis.
So combining the two. Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think the question is on connectivity, but you bring up another good question about managing the credentials on that service as well.
Yeah. And what the external application is, because if the external application is like an application running in your data center, I mean, you obviously have a lot more, you have a lot more answers. You could do like a site-to-site VPN or some sort of, some sort of other tunnel, versus if it's like something running on a bunch of mobile devices, then, you have a much harder way of doing this.
So, this is interesting. You know what you could also consider? Maybe deploying an RDS proxy in a public subnet and then using security groups on that to expose the...
I actually just looked that up, Eric, and I was reading the docs around RDS proxy. Apparently you can't have it be publicly accessible.
Ah!
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing that you were, but unfortunately I didn't know that was a thing, but it says it in their docs for limitations for RDS.
Yeah, if you open up the thread too, they have an interesting security requirement where the instance, they basically have a separate instance. They're running the sync to expose the data, but it's cumbersome. So they were just wondering what are some good approaches.
Yeah, let's open up that thread. Yeah, IL, we have an Aurora Serverless Postgres instance in a private subnet. Now a customer wants to connect externally, an externally hosted application on Azure to it. Well, if it's on Azure, then I do VPC peering. As a temporary fix, we have manually create a regional cluster serverless based on snapshot.
You can't do VPC peering with Azure. You have to do a tunnel.
Well, you can create a VPN connection.
VPN.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Thanks for correcting. Yeah, thanks for correcting me. Yeah. However, it would need more up-to-date information. I would like to prevent deleting the old DB regional cluster recreating on a daily, weekly basis.
Yeah, that was what I was getting at before, where I was saying, like, if it's running somewhere you can control, create a site-to-site tunnel that, and then you can actually put, restrictions on that tunnel as well, what kind of traffic's allowed to go across it.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
All right. Well, that was good. Anything else to add to this one?
Yeah, I guess if you do the Bastion host and you have like a single instance, or I guess you do an auto scaling group or something behind it. Like I've seen that approach work with Fivetran, like Stitch. I think it's a competitor to Stitch. So
yeah, we have a Fivetran. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you do end up doing the Bastion host approach, just doing a something that'll auto heal. So if you do have a disruption, you get it back in like 5 minutes or so.
Yeah. Shameless plug, if you use our Bastion server, it does the auto heal as well in there, so.
I'll be deploying that then, thanks.
Yeah, and it supports custom user data scripts. You can add your own. We have one in here to start with, but then this is where you could also set up some of the keys or whatever you need to do.
Nice.
All right. Next question would be, what if any alternatives, what are any alternatives to Docker Desktop that people are using on Mac computers with M1 chips? Yeah, that's a good take. Yeah, what's the current state of this? What are the best alternatives to Docker Desktop?
I'm using Lima, if anybody's interested in that. And just alias Docker to Lima CTL.
What was the one you brought up?
Lima, I posted in the chat a while ago.
I am using Colima.
Colima?
Yep. So you do brew install Docker and then brew install Colima. Colima start, and it will create the engine for Docker, and then you do all your regular Docker commands.
But I don't understand. You still install Docker if you're running Colima?
Brew install Docker. You don't install desktop.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So it's just okay. So it's Docker core, but not Docker Desktop. And then Colima is a UI on top of it, or?
Yeah, it is like having a Cube Mini. So that's that's where Kubernetes is running. And in this case, it's just the engine of Docker.
It's running a VM on top of within.
Yeah.
Okay.
Similar to Lima. So.
And then there was the I forget what Rancher Desktop. That was another one that aimed to be more of a like GUI replacement.
So I tried Rancher Desktop, and first run everything was great. Second run, the port forwarding gets screwed up, and I don't know if they fixed that yet. But I would expose ports for my Postgres instance locally. Works the first time, and then if I want to rebuild the database, expose the port again, I can't expose any ports. I would have to, I think, do a full restart of the engine, or I think that was it. Maybe a full system reboot. I can't recall. I'm sure I don't have to actually reboot the system, but I just never found the actual services that were having issues. But there was a GitHub issue open about it. I'm not sure if anyone else has used Rancher Desktop on Mac OS and ran into that same problem.
Yeah, I tried it and went and switched to Lima. So.
Yeah, 500 open issues. So, well, clearly it has some usage, but also some issues.
Is the reason for not wanting to use Docker Desktop like because things don't work, or because of licensing. Like OSS licensing stuff?
That was my primary reason at the time, is not having to deal with trying to get budget approval. And so just finding the open source free path would have been easier. And then in the end, given Rancher Desktop wasn't working in my case, it was clear going with Docker, tried and true.
So this is because they instituted, like, if you're over 100 employees or over $10 million in revenue, you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
I don't think the cost is much, but just kind of a bit of a headache to get all the paperwork pushed through.
Make sure the Q's copy goes to accounting.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see, any chatter in the chat? Yeah, so exactly. So Sharif was asking, yeah, so why? And yeah, it's really a financial thing. I mean, even if the cost isn't that bad, if anybody's been in a larger enterprise and having to deal with procurement and approvals and all of that, it's a real nightmare. If you're in a startup, not so much a big deal. And if you're in a startup with over 10 million in revenue, congratulations.
They just need to enable billing through AWS Marketplace, and then everyone will be able to get it.
Yeah, if only that wasn't a little bit.
I was just going to add that for me on Intel based chip on Mac computers, everything was working fine with Minikube and HyperKit as being lightweight virtualization replacement for Docker Desktop. But since I switched to computer with M1 chip, it just didn't work. And as Eric mentioned, sourcing and getting approvals for any kind of licensing for SaaS products, which I guess Docker Desktop is not really a SaaS product, but pretty much anything is kind of painful avenue to explore. That said, I managed to go through it, so I'm happy where I'm at right now. Docker Desktop looks and feels native. I'm glad it works on M1 chips, but
Yeah.
Instead, what turns out to be a reliable and not as expensive alternative here down the road.
So we got a good question here from Roy. Was this Roy? Is Roy on the Slack, or was this on the Zoom, or is this something we found in the Slack? Oh no, it looks like Roy, you're on the Zoom here. So yeah, any suggestions around convincing a team to avoid monolithic Terraform folders with all the resource blocks in a single folder of TF files?
Just
So
go in there and run Terraform destroy. I guarantee everyone will say, that was a really bad idea to have all our infrastructure in one place.
Live and learn, right? FOMO, YOLO. Yeah, I guess a few things to consider here. So now it's probably 2-3 years old. There's a great video going back on like the evolution of Terraform projects and how it is a pretty natural progression to be where you're at with a monolithic folder with all the Terraform in place, and just incremental improvements. It grows and it grows and it grows. The largest problems that you run into is that those plans take a very long time to run. I'm not, have you recently, joking aside, done exactly what Matt suggested? Are you testing the Terraform plan, apply, destroy lifecycle to make sure that is fully deployable? There are many things in Terraform which you can't just do in a single stack or in a single state like this that would need to be broken out. And it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's obscured by the fact that you're always just doing these incremental applies and not doing a full create create and destroy to test that workflow out.
Yeah, it's just that legacy mindset of infrastructure guys. So
it's like it's hard because one of the big we've had to deal with this for a while now is that when you get away from having those monolithic Terraform projects, you are now on the hook for managing state dependency between your projects, and then you need other tooling for that. And it really sucks to have everything in one project and the blast radius for that. And when you break it apart, it really sucks to have your state be inconsistent, or that you need to manage the dependencies between your projects and apply those as well. So for the latter case, we settled on using Spacelift, but you could get the same outcome probably in Scalar and Terraform Cloud and so forth. Things that help you manage dependencies between projects.
So get this. So we're in the process of using TFE on-prem, and they're wanting to continue that same pattern within TFE, which is killing me.
Yeah, and sunk cost fallacy. But how long are your plans taking today?
I'm not sure. I'm not really embedded in that team, so.
And please tell me that they're not doing multiple stages in one Terraform. They're at least just having one stage in.
Oh no, code. It's multiple stages.
So dev staging and prod is in the same. Oh my God. Well, let me find that video and share it. While I do that, anybody else have some points they want to add on this?
The video you're looking for is linked in the Zoom chat.
Oh, thanks. You step ahead of me. So yeah, exactly. Evolving infrastructure, Terraform at Open Credo. So definitely check that out for some material and building a case. Maybe even sharing the video itself.
Thanks.
Since they're old school infrastructure guys, you should ask them why in the data center they had more than one server.
Yeah.
And the same answers probably apply to why you would want to break up your Terraform code. Like scalability, redundancy,
Reduction of
separation
blast
of
radius,
concerns, you know, all these things.
I've already posed all that stuff to them. It's like,
how about consistency? This is one where I live every day, but like consistency, somebody was like, hey, I just created a bucket the other day. Here's the Terraform. It's like a raw resource. It doesn't use our module that sets the logging and the permission. I'm like, thank you. But the point that I was going to make is what we did. I inherited a very monolithic a module that basically was VPC to deployed application, and there were no modules.
You're still using that today, right?
Yeah, but it's a different kind of world. What I've done a lot of abstracting, like CloudFront was deployed everywhere and we were using Lambdas. So it was like a 45-minute turnaround in the early days of this until I figured out I figured that stuff out. But the point that I was going to make is, or the points I was going to make is about development. It's a consistency for stuff like, making sure that all your buckets have the right logging and security and stuff. And you can abstract that out into the module and fix it in one place and then have that, flow through. That's super powerful. Also, if you want to allow developers, like we're toying with the idea of having our module, like an RDS module. So right now it's RDS.tf, and I've, done the preliminary work to get it to be a module, but not yet. But when I do, I can give it to my data guy and be like, just fill these 4 parameters, and, you'll be using the same code we do to spin up the databases and stuff. So there's things like that. What I ultimately wound up doing with Spacelift was taking this application stack thing, and then and that I deploy to, like, I guess there's 8 environments, same code, different versions. But then what I did was I split out a sub-account infra, sub-account access, and we also have like a bastion access. And so what I'm doing now is going from pulling stuff out of the monolith and putting it into the stacks where, I created a little module and then put it into there. So pulling that apart piece by piece gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of the stuff you can do. I mean, there's so many things to talk about this.
I just want to highlight one thing, though, which is an important distinction, because you took it one way, which is correct, Eric, but it wasn't the way I interpreted it at first. So there are really 2 problems here. One is having a monolithic Terraform state, and 2 is having a monolithic Terraform state with just a whole bunch of resource files. So what you are explaining, Eric, is how to solve the problem where, well, we can't get away from the monolith, but at least we can refactor it into modules and make it more manageable and consistent that way, which is a good thing to do anyways. And then from there, it's like, can we break that into smaller Terraform states altogether?
Right. Yeah, we're sort of the roots and the branches of the same problem.
Yeah, so where I came from, we were using TerraGrunt, had a really good pattern around that. So, and state files were all isolated to their own resource, basically, through modules for everything. So
yeah, that's.
And then I come here and it's just I'm losing my mind.
Are the people that you're working with?
There's only like a couple people actually that even know how to manage it, because they're consuming JSON files for variables, and it's terrible. Has
the original team that created it moved on, or?
No, there's basically one guy here that's,
So that could also be the impedance for moving.
Yeah. And it's not documented well either, so it's
job security.
Yep.
All right, cool. That was a good question. Anything else to add on that before we move on?
I think the monoliths gives the people who built it job security because nobody wants to touch that afterwards.
Exactly.
I think so. All right, Sharif, you had a good question here. Let's see what we can say. Maybe we can have a discussion for office hours, but let me just say, I hate Helm charts. Helm charts are shifting right instead of left. Our company's Helm charts for our apps, not third-party apps, are now very complicated and that only a platform DevOps guy can debug them. We end up needing to parameterize everything, and Go templates is basically not enough for all the logic that we need. Curious to know your thoughts and if you feel the same way. So yeah, there definitely this can happen. And question is also, so which pattern for using Helm charts are you using? Does each app have its own Helm chart, or do you have one Helm chart to rule them all?
Okay, so we started with having a Helm chart for every application, but
yeah,
that if we need to add a new feature, we have to like go over every single. So we try to centralize them and having all the logic, because basically they are common in about 90% of the logic they need, but they started to get very big and the logic become very complicated, and the apps are getting bigger and they have lots of components. Like each app has like 1,000 knobs to tweak. Like they have background
that's
jobs.
not testable either in management.
Our workflows for themselves, like you have lots of complicated components. So basically what we found that like I've been implementing this for about 2 years now, and basically the dev teams are not able to like understand all of these things. So, and they don't interact with the Kubernetes API itself. So you have no idea what the deployment is, what an horizontal pod autoscaler is, because they use the Helm chart, because the Helm chart abstract all of this stuff in a very like compact values.yaml and an interface around it. So we end up like nobody's learning Kubernetes, and teams are struggling to change anything in the Helm chart. So we end up doing it.
Yeah, so I have a few thoughts, but it's only because we've been a big proponent of a pattern similar to this for a long time. And I think that we might have even influenced your choice to go down this path, maybe, since you've been around here for a while. So Cloud Posse started off with this pattern back in like 2018 or 2019, and we called it the mono chart. And it was basically a realization that charts across applications that are custom to your company were so similar, they'd be like, you know, the difference between chimpanzees and humans, like a 2% difference. But that 2% made it very difficult to manage the Helm charts when you have 60 to 100 microservices, which sounds like, you know, the kind of problem you were faced with. So then you went to this pattern of reducing it, saying, hey, let's just have one chart and then have all the apps conform to it. And we did that too, but then we ran into some of the same problems that you're talking about right now with our mono chart. Our mono chart is now a master class in how to do Helm templating in YAML. Like every complex situation you want to try and do, we've had to solve it and do the mono chart. But then we have that problem you have, which is like then everybody needs to be a master at writing Go templates and templating your Helm charts. So the evolution of this for us with customers is what you really want to do is standardize the patterns in which applications are deployed to your environment. And if you do this, then I think that if you still have 1,000 feature flags for your things, the fundamental problem isn't with Helm, isn't with charts, it's with the requirements or the expectations that teams are left with. I cannot for the life of me see why you would need to have so many feature flags for so many different ways of deploying your apps if you want to have a consistent way of delivering them to Kubernetes. So let's say you have a couple patterns. You have standard deployment without sidecars and a public load balancer. That's maybe one pattern and one type of chart. You have internal service with Istio service mesh and an Istio gateway or something deployed with it. And that's another pattern. But you shouldn't. You should just distill these into certain patterns to make it manageable.
It's not really applicable in my case because it's like we have like extra features that like extra features that we'll need to add to all the Helm charts. So for example, you mentioned sidecars. So I will not have two charts because an application needs a sidecar, but the other one does not use sidecars. You get what I mean? Like sometimes they're so small, so if I can't like have a chart for every combination, like.
Well, it's not necessarily every combination, but it's kind of like you have front end services that are public, you have back end services that are never public. So this is what's going to be. This is why I can't give you a generic answer for like what those patterns should be. But if you tell me that there's 500 patterns of services and you have 600 services, you have too many patterns. Like why? Like generally, most of these things should be variables passed through to the applications, and those are very easily to abstract away. It's like, and then in terms of Kubernetes functionality, I'd be surprised if you need to leverage every bell and whistle of Kubernetes. But this is the problem you're in. Like if you ultimately need to expose the entire versatility of what Kubernetes has to offer, okay, you're back to square one. Because what's happened is you've templated it away as an abstraction to simplify it, but then because everybody wants to have all these variations, then you've just created now your own dialect of the Kubernetes manifest on top of that in a non-schema validated manner through the values file, and you're back to square one. At that point, look at the other options. This is why customize exists and other things. So you're exposing more of a raw interface to Kubernetes resources and
because we're using our own interface or our own schema for interacting with Kubernetes. It is shifting right because it does not allow people to like get to know the Kubernetes API itself. They don't understand it. They don't interact with it. They fear interacting with it actually because it is very like it's very like we don't allow anyone to use but our Helm charts. So for them, the Kubernetes API is like I don't know, like people don't want to use it, don't want to read about it. I can share the documentation and tell them what to do if they want to like change how the horizontal pullout scaler scales stuff. Right?
A concept that I've taken to heart that I feel like applies a little bit here, maybe not completely, but is the enemy of scale is optionality. Sometimes you just have to kind of funnel people down into a particular way of doing it or a couple of particular ways of doing it if you want to scale past a couple of teams. When you have, when you're a platform engineer and you're building a platform that lots of different teams are going to use, there are going to be certain trade-offs that you have to make in order to be able to maintainably scale.
Yeah. So going back to this point, so I agree with that. And then like this, so the problem is now the engineers are afraid of Kubernetes and they're not getting to understand Kubernetes. And okay, on the one side, like, hey, what is all this stuff we're espousing about DevOps and being, full stack and whatnot? At the same rate, do you really want to put that burden that engineers are not only TypeScript experts, but Kubernetes manifest experts as well? So it's a trade-off. I think it's going to be difficult to scale as well to have everyone have a sufficient level of Kubernetes experience to pick the right toggles there.
Yeah.
Vlad, this seems like a type of question you would have a strong opinion on.
There isn't, like, there's not much I can say. It's a slightly dysfunctional, to put it mildly, situation in, yeah, it's a culture problem, it's an incentives problem, it's a company problem, and it's all made so much worse by how Kubernetes has evolved into put everything in there. You need every single service mesh and every single pattern and every single thing. So yeah, and it's not something that Sheriff, sorry, you will be able to solve, or the platform team you have or infra team you have will be able to solve. This needs executive buy-in. It needs a proper direction and leadership, and that's a whole other topic.
I think it was well summarized. Also, Vlad has an interesting post on platform teams are dead. No, meant to stir a conversation. So interesting to look into.
Which, by the way, just got confirmed by. So we got a really nice public reference, which is the UK government. They just announced they're sunsetting their internal platform, which was built
No
on
way.
Cloud Foundry. Yep,
Wow.
I tweeted about it. I'll
Wow.
search for the tweet a bit later. But yeah, they're sunsetting their pass, and they're looking into what is up next. If it's another pass, if it's a set of patterns, or whatever the result is going to be.
Yeah.
But to answer the original question, like, I started having this problem right before Helm released version 3, so I want to say 2019-ish. And I just went back to vanilla YAMLs and surprisingly Terraform. That, coupled with a lot of simplification of the Kubernetes stack and frankly with moving off Kubernetes.
All right. Well, that was a really interesting question. So I think, let's see if we have any other questions here. Terraspace. Anyone worked with Terraspace? It's so nice to work with, and it solves the monolithic problem. Hey, Patrick, you're using Terraspace?
Hey, yeah. So yeah, I started using it. The problem that I had was, bunch of different Terraform going to different environments. So kind of trying to keep the Terraform dry. I looked into TerraGrunt. TerraGrunt, to me personally, wasn't the best thing to work with. It wasn't actually dry. Terraspace is just really elegant. I like how you can break everything into stacks. It has dependency management. You could apply each stack individually, or you could do like a plan and apply all, and it'll go through all of your stacks and solve dependency. It also has this really nice Terrafile concept where you can manage and version your modules that you pull in. It's just been really nice. It's very pipeline friendly as well.
You've set up, what are your pipelines running in?
So I use GitLab essentially. So I just have this this container that I put together, this build container that has Terraspace installed on it with Terraform. And then the pipeline just executes the Terraspace commands. And then I have just a script that does assuming roles into different accounts, and it just applies the Terraform there.
Did you come from a Rails background out of curiosity?
I did not.
Okay. Because I believe Terraspace is in Ruby, right?
It is. It's written in Ruby, and I use ERB templates. It is a little bit heavy in a sense. I mean, you do have to install Ruby and all its dependencies. But once it's kind of like install it once and forget about it.
Yeah. And you're running it from a container too, so that's probably simplifying it, or?
Right, exactly. So I just version the different containers.
Cool. No, that's interesting. I've definitely seen Terraspace around there for a while. They're one of the first Terraform tools that label themselves as a framework, and it is very much like a framework with the standard types of tools to manage projects. And I like that it's opinionated about the structure of how to organize everything.
Yeah, it's really great. It has a scaffolding tool, just like Rails does, where it can get you started. You just set up an environment variable called ts_env, and it'll figure out what your tf-var file is. Yeah, it's just really nice.
Yeah, cool. Anyone else have something to add? All right. Well, I think we are pretty much out of time for today then. If no other questions, we can wrap things up a little early.
I have a question.
Oh, go for it.
Pulumi. Anybody who's used it?
This is a fun thing that comes up, probably at least once a month or every 60 days or so. But it's good. Let's get the latest check-in. Matt, you've been working with it lately or something, right?
Yeah, not
for some side
too
projects.
distant past for a side project. Yeah, I've used it. I've been a Terraform user for a very, very, very long time, and I personally think it's refreshing and has so many different things that I wish Terraform had over the years, because it's a real programming language rather than being like a declarative syntax. But that doesn't mean that it's perfect and that it has its, it doesn't have its own faults, etc. So it's hard.
Pick your poison.
Yeah. It's hard to, it's hard to generalize and answer like super high level questions like this about any of these tools. Like if I were going greenfield and I had the chance to start like everything again right now, I would probably pick Pulumi to do that. But that doesn't mean that I think it's a panacea and that everything's perfect on the Pulumi side either. So,
well, thank you.
My quick answer.
Anyone else have their take? I think one of the misnomers or misunderstandings with Pulumi has been that it was originally based on wrapping a lot of Terraform providers, so it couldn't get around a lot of the fundamental problems of Terraform. But that is no longer the case, I believe, and they have written a lot of their own native integrations. And then also Amazon came out with the Cloud Control API, which should standardize the interaction with it even more. So I think Pulumi is now more or less in its own category again, and not just in the shadows of Terraform on that sense. That said,
they basically have two versions of their AWS. If we're talking AWS, they have two versions of their AWS provider. That one relies on Terraform bindings under the hood, basically, and then the other one is native on Cloud Control. But that isn't necessarily the case for all of their providers, I would say. But they, So I think Pulumi also is more than just like infrastructure as code, right? They're trying to solve kind of everything at once. Like Terraform took a long time to migrate to, but they have. The one thing I'll say about Pulumi is that their app deployment story is much better than Terraform. So like there are native ways in Pulumi, as an example, to like build Docker files and create Lambda zip files and do a lot of things that Terraform is definitely not well suited for. And then that all plugs into the pipeline. But there are also like they have their own heavy-handed like CI tools, and they have a bunch of other things. So, like I said, it's still not perfect, but in my opinion, the best of what's there, or the best of the imperfects right now. But it is what it is.
The part that I struggle with on Pulumi is I really, really want to like it and go that direction, but we built this company around how do we collaborate on creating patterns around infrastructure? And someone at Pulumi or somebody else might be very quick to point out, well, Pulumi is totally interoperable. You can have things that are in Python work with things that are in TypeScript work with things that are in Go. But I think I am a little bit anxious about saying that in order to apply this infrastructure, it is spanning across 4 different programming languages, pulling in components from all of those. I think that this decision goes away, or this conundrum goes away if you are a enterprise building everything in-house and for the most part are just stuck on one of these languages, frameworks, maybe everything you do is TypeScript, so you're just going to use that. And I think these decisions go away. If you're a company like Cloud Posse trying to build a framework around standards and how to do this in a way that works across companies, what language do you choose? And I've asked this to many people, and everyone said, "Oh, that's obvious. I would just start with Python." And the next person I asked, "Oh, it's obvious. I would just start with TypeScript." And to everyone, there's this obvious first choice of which one of these languages they would go with, and I struggle with that. Love it or hate it, what I like about Terraform is there's just HCL, and you're not in these language wars of which one to pick or choose, and it's kind of like just a de facto standard.
Yeah, you just shifted left, right? It's, should you use Atmos? Should you use Terragrunt? Should you use
Terraspace? Exactly. Yeah. So then we shifted left. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're not wrong on that. So and then the reality is, like Matt says, okay, so we solved that problem. Terraform is not our problem. All right, what tool are we going to use with Terraform to make it actually work? Yeah, that's yeah.
I like how your biggest problem too is there's too much choice of what we want to do with this with this problem with Pulumi. Like, we can choose any language we want. I hate that. Make me use a language that I hate instead.
That might be its downfall, because when you think about it, there's so much choice in Linux, and therefore it's non-standard and nobody will port to it. Or I mean, for certain things that people will not port to Linux because of the, many distributions that there are, and there are little differences.
Or like, there's so many options with Kubernetes, and that's why ECS might be considered so wildly popular. It's just a simpler route to go. That's dumbs it down, dumbs your choices down for you. I think that there are also different concerns. There's the concerns of developers. There's the concerns of the business. There's the concerns of, I guess, the end users and the customers of these things. Developers is like, dude, I have this ticket. It's in my sprint. I just want to get it done. I know how to do this. If I was just using TypeScript, it'd be so freaking easy. And then you have the concerns of the business, which would be that, well, okay, so you're able to get it done very quickly in this little way, but it's not based on the way that anyone else in the entire company is doing things, and there's no standardization. So now you got 1,000 little snowflakes on how S3 buckets are created everywhere within the organization. So what is the balance between total versatility, just get the job done in the way you love it the most, and then putting in a little bit more process, a little bit more standard? Granted, even with the language, your company out now could have a library for how you provision with Pulumi your S3 buckets and standardize that and have those abstractions, but someone still needs to do that, or should be doing it. All right, well, that was interesting. Thank you all for the conversation today. I was always interested to talk a little bit more about these different things, including Terraliths and Terraspaces and the Pulumi. So if you enjoy this content and wanted to get more of it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that you'll get updates every time we post a new video. Andy has been going through and catching up on our back catalog of outtakes from other popular episodes that we've had. We also have an invitation that goes out if you go to cloudposse.com cloudposse.com/officehours. You can subscribe and get a calendar invite for our weekly session here. Also, if you like what you heard today and you'd like to engage with Cloud Posse at some time and hire us, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz. And you can set up a session to talk with us about how we can make a difference for your organization. With that said, thanks everyone for your time today. We'll see you all next week, same time, same place.